Hello and welcome to the Dream Team Professor podcast. My name is Scott, and in this episode, we're looking at the top players to target in Game Week 20 Sun Dream Team, which is the return of the Champions League and Europa League. So we'll be looking at targeting those players that play in Europe again. It's a Saturday morning deadline, so 11 a.m. The deadline stream will be returning over on the Dream Team Tonic podcast. So do keep an eye out for that one. But the main talking points will be this week looking into the European player pool, removing those players that do just have single game weeks or no Europe. But we also want to have a look at what single game week players could be worth keeping, because we've got Isak as the informed striker in the Premier League at the moment. You've got Gordon on a crazy run of attacking returns for Newcastle, and Newcastle on a win streak. And then Cole Palmer as well, always really, really dangerous to remove. So that will be the main talking points today. European football, and then which single game week players could be worth keeping. We'll kick off the episode, as always, by looking at the fixture ticker from ffstuff.co.uk, a great free website for all your dream team needs or fantasy football needs in general. But this is the fixture ticker on the screen. But before we go into it, I've set myself a target this season of reaching 4,000 subscribers by the end of the season. So if you found anything useful from this podcast across the season so far, or I've helped you in any way, please do consider hitting the subscribe button. So Game Week 20, European double game week for Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester United, Aston Villa, and Spurs. Obviously, Chelsea are a European side as well, but there's no European matches for Chelsea at this time. So all other Premier League teams just play once. The same teams also got on to double in Game Week 21 as well. So you'll be getting 4 fixtures for 2 across Game Week 20 and Game Week 21 if you do go for these European sides. Then come Game Week 22, we then have the Carabao Cup semi-second legs. So it'll be Arsenal versus Newcastle at Newcastle. And then Spurs play Liverpool away from home, so at Anfield. So Newcastle and Spurs taking their leads into those games. So Newcastle will be back with a double in Game Week 22. Arsenal double again, Liverpool double again, and Spurs double again in Game Week 22. So those teams will have 6 fixtures versus 3 on most of the non-European teams, apart from Newcastle, of course, who will have 4 as they're also in the Carabao Cup. Man City, United, Villa will all have 5 fixtures across those 3 game weeks, just the European matches minus the Carabao Cup. And then it's a while away yet, but in Game Week 23, we'll have the return of the FA Cup. We'll also have the European playoff rounds in the Europa League and the Champions League, but we don't know for certain who will definitely be in the playoffs at the moment. We should have a better idea after Game Week 20 comes to an end. Liverpool versus Everton, the fixture that was postponed due to the adverse weather, has also been rescheduled for that week. So again, plenty of games for Liverpool. They'll have a double in Game Week 23 as well. And it's worth keeping an eye on Arsenal because they now have a blank in Game Week 23 where they're out of the FA Cup. So talk of Arsenal going on another warm weather trip to Dubai. So last time they came back, really fresh and doing well after that. So maybe that's one thing to look out for after. But for that period, you'll want to have your Arsenal players out because they will be blanking. In terms of who has the best fixtures, I don't think there's any huge standouts from these European sides. So Man City are away twice. Ipswich is the more desirable fixture of the 2, but then it's PSG away, which you'd think is going to be a tough game. City looking better in attack, but unreliable at the back again. Liverpool got Brentford away, which is tough, but you would still fancy them as favourites. And then Lille at home. I think that looks like an okay fixture, although Lille are on a good run themselves. United probably have the best double, but are obviously a bit of a weaker side than the 2 just mentioned. So Brighton at home, Rangers at home. They're still to play this evening against Southampton. So how they do in that game might influence how we're feeling about them next week. Arsenal and Villa both face off against each other. So it's not ideal if you're looking at Arsenal players or Villa players. But Arsenal have Zagreb at home. So back-to-back home games again for them. And then Villa away at Monaco after the Arsenal game. So not the worst fixtures, but not great to have 2 teams playing against each other. I do like Spurs fixtures. So Both of them are away, but they've got Everton and Hoffenheim, so you'd expect 2 wins. But Spurs have been pretty inconsistent of late, beating the likes of Liverpool, struggling against Tamworth, and then losing to Arsenal. But I do like Spurs in the longer term. Looking past Arsenal and Villa playing each other, their fixtures look pretty strong in the longer term as well. United have got a nice fixture run. But again, the options feel a little bit limited outside of Bruno Fernandes. Maybe some more options might emerge after this evening. Liverpool fixtures look nice long term, but there's plenty of games coming for them. They've got quite a few people returning back from injury or reaching full fitness. So, likes of Jota coming into the attack is going to make a rotation headache there. I like Arsenal all the way through to game week 21, but game week 22, there's a really tough double of Manchester City at home and Newcastle away. So game week 23 is a blank, but you may even want to consider moving off some of your Arsenal players in the week before that. City have a nice week, but then Chelsea at home, Club Brugge at home in game week 21. You'd expect they do pretty well in that. But in game week 22, Arsenal away, and then you'd imagine that they're going to rotate quite heavily in the FA Cup. So not necessarily the best run, but if they do start to pick up some form, I think we are going to want these City players. Despite Newcastle not doubling until game week 22, I think we still are going to want to consider their fixtures because they do have a nice run of green fixtures currently. So Bournemouth at home. Now, arguable whether that is actually going to be a green fixture because Bournemouth have had some really good results against some top sides. Obviously made it difficult for Chelsea last week. But then they then have Southampton away, which is one of the best fixtures on paper. And then game week 22, Fulham at home, Arsenal at home. So you're going to have to consider if you do want to look to move Newcastle players out this week, would you want them for Southampton? You probably would. And then if you end up keeping them for Southampton, you may as well keep them for the Fulham Arsenal double in game week 22. And then, of course, FA Cup in 23. So we're going to talk a little bit about Newcastle later in the episode. There will be timestamps as well below. So if you want to hop around, you can go to whatever team you like. And then we'll look at Chelsea as well. So it is just Wolves at home. They do just have single game weeks for the next 3 weeks. So just 3 fixtures in 3 game weeks. But Cole Palmer is going to be a big decision to make because Wolves at home feels like a prime fixture. They've just had a heavy defeat to Newcastle. A game where Palmer had 4 attacking returns earlier in the season. But then after that, they've got an away single to Manchester City. So Palmer against his old club, he could still do well, but that does look like a bit of a tough fixture. So maybe that could be the move off point from Chelsea players or Palmer. So those teams I've just mentioned will be the focus of this episode. European sides, Chelsea and Newcastle. But of course, if you've got any questions about players from other teams, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll get back. Let's start off by looking at Liverpool. So I've got the match center up from FF Stuff as well on the screen from their most recent game. So they had the 4-0 win at home to Accrington Stanley, which saw the entire team rotated pretty much other than Trent Alexander-Arnold. That's a story in itself. Jota, Tsimikas, Kwanzaa kept their place from the previous match in the Carabao Cup against Spurs. But other than that, it pretty much was a fully rotated side. And then they had the 1-1 draw against Forest, who are in form themselves. And that is one that a lot of people did highlight as potentially being a tough game. A lot of people went against Salah this week, and it did pretty much pay off. So Liverpool have got the maximum fixtures across 4 doubles across the next 4 weeks for them. So there is going to have to be rotation at some point. They're not going to play the same team in every match. But you'd look at probably the European fixture and the FA Cup fixture as being those main opportunities to rotate. Probably this first European fixture, you'd imagine they're probably going to try and go full strength and get it done. But then the FA Cup against Plymouth, you'd imagine that they're going to do a similar thing to what they did in the last round. Probably rotate the whole team, but still stick Trent out there so he can get a massive haul. They do need to overturn a defeat in the Carabao Cup, and the league is the priority. So you'd imagine that Spurs home game in 22 is probably going to be pretty strong. And then the league is, of course, going to be a priority after dropping points. And, well, it's the league, isn't it? So let's talk about Trent Alexander-Arnold first. So 5.7 million, 17 points, a goal, and a controversial clean sheet where he went off in the 59th and some amount of seconds. So I saw that upset a lot of people online, but they do tend to round up to the nearest minutes. But in the rules, it actually doesn't really make that clear. So can be a frustrating one, especially if you don't own Trent or you took him out last week. 2 shots on target, tackles in that match as well against Accrington. I just didn't expect that he would play in this one, and I don't think many people did. So I took him out this week, and we will do my team update after. But I thought he'd probably end up with just the Forest game, and I didn't think that would be the best fixture to target. It turned out it wasn't. He did just get the 3 points in the Forest game. But if you didn't have Trent this week, it was very damaging to your rank, which you'll see later on. He has just hit 3 points across the 2 game weeks before that, but had the 19-pointer against West Ham previous to that as well. So we've seen now 19 points in the West Ham game, 17 points in this Accrington game. If he gets a clean sheet and attacking returns, it is going to be a bloodbath. If you've got the budget, he's definitely a transfer in. And if you've got him, you're definitely holding him. He's the highest scoring defender in the game at the moment. 2 goals, 6 assists for the season. Now, it probably is going to be some rotation with Connor Bradley at some point here, but it's hard to know when. I think probably going to go full strength against Brentford. Probably going to go full strength against Lille. Maybe there's sort of 60-odd minute subs again in those. Ipswich, 21. You're definitely going to want him home to Ipswich. But then maybe if the European result goes their way in the Champions League, that second Champions League game could be one where possibly Bradley comes in. And then the FA Cup, that's anyone's guess. Virgil van Dijk, can he sort of cover Trent if he can't quite get there? So 0.6 less. Obviously doesn't have quite the attacking threat that Trent has. But I would say that Virgil is pretty much more nailed than Trent. So Trent could obviously rotate with Bradley. But they're running out of options at centre-back at the minute, Liverpool. Virgil's just had his rest against Accrington Stanley, so you imagine that he's going to be good for a good run of games. So I imagine he's going to play the bulk of these and then probably just miss the Plymouth game. So I do think that he could be a decent option. Maybe if you're looking to move off of Arsenal, if you're getting fed up with those. Tsimikas could be tempting if you look at the points. So he's done really well over the last 3 game weeks. But that includes sort of 2 clean sheets for the B team, if you want to call it that. So obviously the rotated side that played against Spurs, and then the rotated side that played against Accrington Stanley. So as good as he is, I think you could potentially be fooled there. I do think there's going to be plenty of rotation with him and Robertson. So I'd avoid Tsimikas personally and try and stick to Trent and Virgil if you can. Konate has come back, but his minutes seem to be getting managed and he is getting rotated a fair bit at the moment. So I wouldn't go there yet either. Salah, in terms of Salah, I don't think we need to talk about him until we get to the captaincy because no one's transferring him out this week, despite just getting the 5-pointer. But we're not selling, are we? So I think the main consideration on him is captaincy, but we'll do that towards the end. Is it worth doubling up on the Liverpool attack or mids? So I'm assuming we've all got Salah. I'm talking about, do we want to add a second striker or a midfielder from Liverpool to go with Salah, while they've got plenty of fixtures? So let's look at the striker options first. So you've got Jota at 4.2 million. So he's got 35 points across the last 3 game weeks. And again, if you want to look at this is all on ffstuff.co.uk. You can look between certain time frames, but 35 points across the last 3 game weeks for Jota is really impressive. 5 points behind Salah. So he has been doing really well, but he's only had 2 starts in his last 5 matches. So a real impact sub, Jota, scoring 3 goals in those 5. Back-to-back goals this week. So a start against Accrington Stanley, and then pretty much just scoring with his first touch off the bench against Forest. A real difference maker of a player. Is he close to breaking into the first 11? I think he probably is. Diaz has dipped slightly playing that striker role. Jota's minutes are gradually increasing. So I do think it's only a matter of time before we start seeing Jota as that centre forward a little bit more. 8 goals, 3 assists for him for the season. But he is always going to be managed a little bit with his injury sort of record. You've got Gakpo at 4.8, 12 goals, 4 assists for the season. So 5 points against Forest without an attacking return. but he did get completely rested for Accrington Stanley. I feel like he's one of Slot's favourite players on that left-hand side. Surprisingly, Diaz has actually had more minutes than him, though, when I looked on FB Ref. So Diaz, 1,701 minutes versus Gakpo's 1,660. But both of them have 19 starts. Gakpo has played 3 matches more than Diaz, so it's really not that much to split the two of them. I do think either of them, Jota or Gakpo, could be really good options for this run of games. So the fixtures look good. I mean, that Ipswich at home game does really stand out as one that could be a really nice one to target if you can get the right player. But all this is sort of irrelevant unless we're selling one of our attackers. If you're on a front three, and I'm currently on Haaland, I'm currently on Salah, and I'm currently on Isak. Now, is it worth removing Isak to make way for someone like Jota or Gakpo? So you're just kind of gambling on 90 minutes of Isak versus somewhere between 90 and I'd say 150 minutes of Jota or Gakpo. So I'm assuming that's sort of a 90-minute match and then a 60-minute with a sort of getting subbed off situation for Jota or Gakpo. Now, with Isak absolutely on fire at the minute, going for that sort of consecutive goals record, I don't know if I would back 150 minutes of a Gakpo or Jota versus Isak. You've also got pens for Isak too. I don't know. Let me know what you think. But personally, I think I'm sort of leaning towards Isak over one of those two. So that would move you on to midfielders. So I think it's down to either Diaz 4 million or McAllister 4.3. Diaz, he's had spells, hasn't he? He's been the same way pretty much all season. So he has big haul and then a string of blanks. And those blanks really do test your patience with the price drops. While other players are doing well, you get tempted to bring those in. He's had 3 consecutive blanks with 12 goals, 4 assists for the season. So same attacking returns as Gakpo, but he does have these barren spells. So he could potentially be decreasing in minutes with Jota coming back as Jota becomes fitter. I don't think it's a problem to hold on to Diaz as long as you're happy to take the price decrease. But I just don't think it's a buy at the minute. I still think if I was going to buy, I'd prefer Gakpo currently over him. But then you just have the problem with the attacking spot. So at the moment, I think I'd either hold Diaz or sell him. I sold him last game week. So, you know, my true feelings there. You've then got McAllister. So you're comparing two very different players. So in terms of Diaz, you've got someone that's inconsistent, but has a really high ceiling. You're not quite sure whether they're going to start every single game. But with McAllister at 4.3, you lose some of that attacking threat. So just 3 goals, 5 assists for the season. But you do gain sort of safety of minutes and safety of start. So 4.9 average for McAllister versus Gakpo and Diaz, for example, 6.1. Just over 2,000 minutes for McAllister, but his recent returns have been 4, 5, 12, 6, 11, and 11. So he rarely does blank completely. That's where he gets sort of bonus points, tackle points, and a bit of a mixture of everything. He was taking corners at one point, but I can't quite work out what the sort of routine or pattern is with these Liverpool corners. He took none against Forest with Trent and Robertson back sharing the corners, but previously to that, he was taking a fair few. So I don't mind McAllister if you're going for sort of volume of games in this busy fixture period, but it isn't the most exciting pick. Let's look at Manchester City next. So they had their 8-0 demolition of Salford City. You saw hauls for fringe players like Doku, Grealish, McAtee, but Haaland, Foden, KDB, Vardiol all left out of that Salford match. But Phil Foden did get on the pitch for an assist. The others just stayed uninvolved in this match. So it looked like City were back. Questions started to pop up on Twitter and stuff. Worse, is this the start of City returning back to form? They were cruising 2-0 against Brentford. Still look dodgy at times at the back. So no surprise when they went to then draw the game 2-2 after conceding a couple of late goals. So The question of are Man City back? I think we can split that into two parts because actually, from the attacking point of view, I do feel like we're seeing them back to their best. So the attacking play seems to be fixed, but the same problems keep happening at the back or in midfield with Rodri's absence. So we've got Foden, who's found some form, De Bruyne, who looks like he's getting back fit and looking better, and then you've got Savinho, who's making that left-hand side his own, which should all lead to Haaland getting back to his best. But again, they keep conceding these sloppy goals without Rodri or without being able to fill that void. They are linked with quite a few players at the minute, but we can't do anything about transfers until they're fully over the line. So with their poor performances in Europe, we know that they can't mess about too much. They're one of the teams that looks likely that they're going to have to play the playoff rounds. So the City players that you do go for, there's a very good chance that you are going to get these European matches and you're going to get other European matches down the line as well. So we're going to start off with Phil Foden, 6.2. I think he's going to be very, very popular this week. And fair play, I saw a load of people that bought Foden in this week and last week, and they were sort of almost gambling on that he would start to pick up this form, and he has. So that is a real good example of why you need to sometimes take the punt and take the gamble of being the first on players. So Foden done really, really well this week. 2 goals, 1 assist, 19 points. Got that brace against Brentford and the assist off the bench against Salford. He's actually returned consistently since game week 19. If you look back over the last 3 game weeks, only Isak, Gordon and Trent have more points than Foden. 7 goals, 4 assists for the season. He's quite a bit behind on what he was doing last season. But yeah, well played if you went early. And I think he'll be extremely popular after this haul. Haaland, 8 million. Now, again, most people have already got Haaland in their team. But this is probably for the people that took Haaland out and they're now wondering whether they should bring him back in. So he got 5 points against Brentford, and it was an unused sub against Salford. So a few shots on target against Brentford. Actually had some really good chances in that one, but unused against Salford, which will frustrate a lot of people because Pep did put a few comments out that sort of insinuated that Erling Haaland could be involved, but it wasn't to be. But with the players around him starting to pick up a bit of form, I would be worried to go without Haaland. He's got 21 goals this season, and I do think that he could be a captaincy shout in a couple of the upcoming game weeks. So I think Haaland is a buy if you don't have him. And of course, if you've got him already, you're not going to transfer him out. De Bruyne, 5.6. Now, he could probably or potentially go under the radar with Foden being the sort of standout in the midfield for City at the minute. But KDB's had back-to-back assists against West Ham and Brentford. He's had 90 minutes in each of his last 3 appearances. So it does seem like he is sort of getting somewhere near full fitness. Put a really nice cross in that Brentford game. And it does seem like they are starting to capitalize on these crosses now, Manchester City. And we know De Bruyne does that well. So 2 goals, 5 assists for the season. Again, is behind what he should really be on. But if he is starting to get 2 games a week, 90 minutes, that is what we want of Kevin De Bruyne. So I do think that he could be a decent punt. I think I'd obviously favour going Foden first. But if you've got the budget or you're willing to take out an Isak or Palmer, that double up of Foden or KDB could be quite effective. A double up of Savinho also could work. So 4.3 million, started twice this week. Somehow didn't get an attacking return in the 8-0 against Salford, playing 55 minutes. I put him in another format, Telegraph, and when I saw it as 8-0, I thought he's definitely going to have some sort of return, but nothing in that game. He got 90 minutes against Brentford in this game, got an assist, so 8 points in that one. He's not scoring many goals, so he's only on 1 goal for the season, but he does have 11 assists, and he's in the top 10 performers over the last 3 game weeks, scoring 1 goal and 5 assists in his last 4 games. So Savinho does seem to be in form. He does seem to have made that left-hand side his own. There could always be rotation when it comes to Man City, but I do think he is a very good option at the moment for City. Vardiol, 4.3. So I think the theme for this game week to me is that defenders just don't seem very inspiring at the moment. There's no real standouts. And City's defence is the same. So just 3 clean sheets in the last 10. Salford was one of those, so you can maybe downplay that one a little bit. But Salford was Vardy's only rest in City's last 10 games. So you would expect that he's going to play the bulk of games, and he's always a threat going forward. So 4 goals for the season, 18 bonus points. I do think he is a good option. It's just, do you see them keeping clean sheets in this run? I do think it's questionable. Talking of lack of clean sheets, let's move on to my team, Arsenal. So it has been a rough couple of game weeks for Arsenal. We had the draw against Brighton, we had the Newcastle loss in the Carabao Cup, followed by being eliminated from the FA Cup by Manchester United, a 10-man Manchester United on penalties. I think you can summarise the poor performances by being poor in front of goal, not taking their chances, and then conceding from the very few chances that they are giving away. But the 2-1 win against Spurs in the North London derby has lifted the mood. It could be a catalyst for a change of momentum, potentially for the team. The question remains, is there really anything to target in attack for Arsenal at the moment? So personally, I would steer clear. I said the same thing last week. Jesus is now injured. We've got Nwaneri injured. We've got Saka injured. So we're down to just really Martinelli, Havertz, Trossard, Sterling back into the mix, and Erdegaard. Martinelli has been a bit disappointing recently. Havertz, confidence is on the floor. These may improve after Spurs. Trossard has been getting pelters from the Arsenal fan base recently, but become a bit of a hero in that North London derby. And that's what Arsenal have been crying out for. Someone just to take a shot from long range. Sterling did get a start on the right wing in the North London derby, but he's not going to be an option. And then we've got Erdegaard. Now, Erdegaard had been disappointing recently, but he's actually had an okay game week. So the Man United game, I must admit, I was a bit frustrated with him not having as many shots as I would have liked and putting a lot of crosses in that never seemed to reach their intended target or get put away. But actually, when I went and watched the game back against United, he actually created quite a lot. We just didn't have anyone to finish. And then against Spurs, he got the assist, so 8 points, and he looked much better, more like himself. So I'm not going to rush out and buy Erdegaard. No chance. I do think that Arsenal need someone to put away the chances that he creates, but he could be one to potentially watch. For 5 points against Man United, free bonus, where he created a lot of chances. Arsenal are getting linked with a striker, but it's just question marks when that's going to get done by. So personally, I still would pass on the Arsenal attackers. So defensively for Arsenal, I'm a little bit torn at the minute. So there's no clean sheets in the last 5 games. In 4 of those matches, they just conceded the odd goal, apart from Newcastle, who put 2 past us with Isak and Gordon, I think it was. In that Newcastle game, Arsenal were poor defensively in spells. But outside of that, it was a penalty against Brighton. And other than that, I don't think our defence was too terrible. Brentford, United, and Spurs were all goals conceded from sort of long-range shots, really good finishes, but quite low XG chances. Arsenal not really giving up much of the ball, not giving up many chances, but the very few chances they have conceded goals from. So I don't know. I still think Arsenal are a really solid defence, but it just hasn't quite happened in terms of clean sheets. And it's been even more frustrating because there have been a lot of clean sheets kept by other sides. I'm on 3 Arsenal defenders, or if you include the goalkeeper, so Raya, Timber, and Gabriel. And in my mind, I would actually be happy to keep them if I didn't need to maybe raise a bit of budget. But it is in my mind that game week 23 is a blank for Arsenal. So eventually you are going to have to move some of your Arsenal players on. Maybe that has to start now, or maybe you could wait until that game week 22 when it's City and Newcastle. But in that run-up, there are plenty of games. Villa is going to be a tough one, but Dynamo Zagreb, that looks like a fixture that could be a clean sheet. Wolves away from home, I think that's a potential clean sheet. Or Girona away from home. That they look like a good run of fixtures, and I would expect there to be at least one clean sheet, potentially two. City and Newcastle away from home, I feel less confident about that, obviously. And you don't want to leave too many in, having to move two out the following week. So short term, I think Arsenal still good. But then by game week 22, 23, you are going to want to remove him. Gabriel, 5 million. So 5 goals, 2 assists. Got that goal against United. And quite honestly, I feel like he should be playing as our centre forward at the minute. The amount of chances and goals he's getting. Very unlucky not to have another one at Spurs. Now, this has upset quite a few people, including myself at the time. Cross comes in, puts the header in, or it looks like the header goes straight in, but it gets a deflection off Solanke. So you're assuming first fault is going to be a goal. Second fault is actually it's going to be an assist for an own goal. It was not given, it was added on, and then it was taken away again on both Dream Team and FPL. I think the reason I haven't given it is because it looks like when you slow it right down that it potentially hits Gabriel, then Dragas in, and then Solanke and goes in. So it is really, really unlucky, but Gabriel is just such a threat from these corners. So Gabriel's in my team. I've got no thoughts about removing him at the moment. The only player who I would really consider selling Gabriel for at the minute would potentially be if it was the only way to get to Trent. But at the moment, I'm completely happy keeping Gabriel. Timber 4.2, got 7 points this game week, tackles in each. And again, I feel like a clean sheet is coming for Arsenal. But I think myself and a lot of fans are a little bit worried about the amount of minutes that Timber is playing. Obviously, off the back of an ACL last season, we just don't have any options at right back, apart from maybe playing Party there at times. There is talk that White and Tomiyasu are training and stepped up their training, but it's not quite first team training at the minute. I think it is a keep for Timber, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is a rest for him somewhere here. Maybe that Champions League game against Dynamo Zagreb. So I think he's a keep, but Porro, Vardiol could be decent options if you are fed up of the lack of clean sheets from Arsenal. Before we head on to Aston Villa, if you enjoyed the video so far, please do leave a like. And if you're not subscribed already, do consider hitting that subscribe button. So Aston Villa, back-to-back doubles, a nice fixture run for them. They're still in the FA Cup, drawing Spurs. 3 wins on the bounce. They look like they are in a good position at the minute. Strong position in the Champions League as well, but they still obviously need to make sure they get it done. Watkins, 5 million. So since game week 17, he started 4 games in a row, 90 minutes in all of them, 2 goals, 2 assists. So finding some form again, blanking just the once in that period. Got 9 points against Everton, 2 assists against West Ham earlier in the week. But Duran was obviously suspended for 3 of those 4 games. He was actually on the bench for the match against Wolves last night. I'm sorry, not Wolves, against Everton last night. But he didn't come on. There's been a little bit of speculation about his future, but I do think he's probably going to stay. So the question mark is Duran going to take minutes off Watkins? And is Watkins worth maybe taking Isak's place? The same debate we had a bit of a minute ago. So I think Watkins is going to start Arsenal. He always does really well against us. So then maybe Duran gets that European fixture against Monaco. But do you bench Watkins when he's in this good of form? I'm not sure. So maybe there's a potential that Watkins starts Arsenal and gets an early sub. And then maybe starts Monaco and gets an early sub. I do think he is a really good option. But is it again a better option than getting that sort of one less fixture out of Isak, but knowing that he's going to pretty much play all of the minutes and he's banging form? I'm still not completely sold on the idea of selling Isak, even though I'm normally someone that would always go for the extra fixtures. Let us know in the comments below if you think Isak would be a better buy than Watkins this week, or a better hold than having Watkins in your team this week. Is a good option. I'm not sure I can do it. Rodgers at 3.5. Now, I think he's going to be on a lot of people's radar now with the return to Europe. He's got 2 returns this week, a goal against West Ham and an assist against Everton. 90 minutes in each as well. Minutes never seem to be a real concern for him. 2 returns in the match before that as well. So a goal and an assist against Brighton before getting a suspension for too many yellow cards. So Rodgers, solid pick, should get a price rise, and the fixtures look good long term. Martinez 3.5. So annoyed a lot of people because he was injured for the West Ham game and there was no real sign of it. So a lot of people bought him in this week and then he missed that Carabao Cup, FA Cup match. But then comes in, plays Everton, gets the clean sheet. He's got a bonus point, a couple of saves as well, 9 points. And he's a solid option when Europe's on. Second highest keeper in the game behind Raya. And I can't help but look at Martinez and look at the Arsenal fixture. He is always up for it. So I do think that he's a really, really good option going into Europe. Comparing him to Raya, Raya has got sort of one more fixture in game week 22. So he's got more consistent doubles. But then Martinez is just going to have that game in 23 where Raya blanks. So I don't think there's much in it there as well. But you save a little bit of money. Digne 3.1, so look at a few defenders. Maatsen could be a problem for him. In the last few European rounds, when they were back, you had Digne playing in the Champions League, and then Maatsen played the Premier League fixtures last time out. So earlier in the season, Digne was starting both Premier League and Champions League, but that slowed down as we went later into the tournament. Returns haven't been great for Villa in general recently, so that is something to consider. But I do think the fixtures do start to improve. Matty Cash, 3 million, same sort of price point, just 0.1 cheaper. I think he might be a little bit safer potentially than Digne for minutes and starts, just where at the moment they don't seem to have many fit centre backs. So at times, Konsa sometimes went to right back. I don't think they've got that luxury at the minute. So maybe Cash is a little bit safer. You have got Bogard and Nedeljkovic on the bench that could take minutes, but are they going to take that risk against Monaco or Arsenal? I don't think they are. If they do end up qualifying early, maybe they could do it against Celtic. But other than that, I do think unless they go to the transfer window and get another defender in, I do think it looks on paper that Cash could be potentially pretty safe. If you are a Villa fan and you have a bit more info on that, you can drop a comment, let us know if I've got it wrong. On to Spurs. So I was going to say poor form, but I'd say inconsistent form. Poor form in the league, definitely. League positions awful at the minute. But they did have that clean sheet against Liverpool, and a good result in the Carabao Cup. And then, although Tamworth was probably a bit painful for them, they did go on, keep a clean sheet and get the win in the end. So they're doing all right in cup competitions, but the Premier League is a bit shocking at the minute. So no wins in 5 in the Prem, but still all to play for in Europe. I still think they are going to go as strong as possible with the injuries they've got in most of the competitions. So Pedro Porro 4.2, poor game against Arsenal. He got absolutely skinned by Trossard. He was the player that I bought in for Trent Alexander-Arnold this week, and he's done pretty well. But seeing him get skinned by Trossard, that kind of felt like real summary of how the week went with that transfer. He got 90 minutes against Arsenal, 120 minutes against Tamworth, which was unexpected. So that kind of did save me a little bit for the Trent scenario. I didn't expect that Trent would play. He hauled when I took him out. I didn't expect that Porro would play, but he went on to keep a clean sheet and probably dug me out a little bit. He's been on a nice run though. So 32 points from his last 3 game weeks puts him inside the top 20 players for that period. 24 bonus for the season, 2 goals, 6 assists. He's getting plenty of attacking returns. Hit the post against Arsenal, quite unlucky there. So he's got the same attacking returns as Trent, but he just doesn't quite have the sort of same amount of clean sheets, and you don't see them keeping the same amount of clean sheets as a team like Liverpool or Arsenal. So it's the clean sheets that are lacking. With the minutes that he has played in this last game week, I am a little bit worried that he will get a bench in somewhere here. I don't think it'll be Everton in the Prem. Maybe it'll be Hoffenheim. I don't think it'll be Leicester in the Prem. Their Prem form does need to improve. So I think it will be in Europe. But obviously, they are lacking options at the back. Kulusevski, 4.3. I like having him back in my team. I went a period without him, and he's scoring goals for fun. I brought him back. It was a little bit quiet for the first week, but he was back on the score sheet for Tamworth. 8 goals, 9 assists for the season. With that goal off the bench against them, played 30 minutes. I think him not starting that game was typically his rest, and I imagine he is probably going to play a lot of minutes over this period. So I think Kulusevski still a really solid buy. Again, a lot of strikers to compare to Isak if you have got Isak still. Son and Solanke, are either of them worth your third striker spot? So Solanke, 11 goals, 8 assists. Son, 8 goals, 9 assists, grabbing that goal against Arsenal. I'd still favour Solanke just for the minutes. So has the third most minutes behind Porro and Kulusevski. There's not really much to rotate him with, unless you want to include Richarlison, who had a bench appearance against Arsenal. 24 starts out of his 29 games. But again, can I comfortably go for Solanke over Isak, even with the extra games? Probably not. Isak's got 24 returns to Dom's 19, and Solanke's played 6 games more as well. So I think Isak obviously a lot more efficient. Kinski 2.8. Now I wish I'd probably just gone Kinski as my downgrade for Raya last week instead of downgrading Trent to Porro. He had that clean sheet against Tamworth. Before that, he had the clean sheet against Liverpool. And then he still managed to get a few points against Arsenal. So 4 points in that game. So making 3 saves. Very close to hitting 3 bonus points as well. And somehow I even ended up with 2 tackle points. A very shaky keeper at times. You can see that he's probably going to get caught out at some stage. But plays out from the back quite nicely, to be fair. Now, he's not going to get Europe. We found out that he's not going to get Hoffenheim or Elfsborg. He's not going to get either of those matches because he's already played in the Europa League. So he is just got to be considered as a single game week keeper. But he will have Carabao Cup in game week 22. And he will have FA Cup in game week 23 as long as Vicario hasn't come back and taken the spot back. So I do still think at 2.8 million, he could be an all right buy. They're going to concede plenty of chances, plenty of opportunities to make saves. I think he's a good shout. A couple budget enablers, I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but Dragusin, 2.1. They don't keep clean sheets. Not a great player, but you probably are going to get plenty of games out of Dragusin. Spence, 2.7, I think is a better sort of dream team asset and better for scoring points than Dragusin. But he's not in the European squad either, like Kinski. So probably have to lean Dragusin, even though I think Spence is a little bit better. But 2.7, Spence, still not a bad option, even without Europe. Man United, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them because they've still got a game to play at the time of recording this. Obviously, done well to go through in the FA Cup against my team, Arsenal. Down to 10 men as well in that game. But it was a pretty decent display from them, to be honest. A really well taken goal from Bruno Fernandes. And they all worked really, really hard to keep Arsenal out. So can't really have any complaints. Bruno Fernandes is the standout option. Now, a lot of people went for him last week. I bought him in last week with the intention to captain him. I didn't expect that he'd score against Arsenal. I was expecting the bulk of the points in that game against Southampton. So still to see how that goes, but happy with the 1 goal for the week so far. But is there anyone else worth targeting than Bruno Fernandes? I still think if you haven't got Bruno, he's a really good option with all these nice looking fixtures. But is there anyone else outside of him? Mazraoui, 2.9 million. I think he's had a bit of a rough few game weeks. His returns have been pretty poor recently, but 2.9 million. You expect that if you compare that to Spence, who we just spoke about, I think there's probably just as much chance, if not more chance, that United keep clean sheets. And then Mazraoui does have the chance of getting the European fixture, so I think he would have to be a better buy. He has done okay for tackle points and stuff like that as well. It just seems like he did slow down quite a bit recently. I also was, and I regret to say it, impressed with Harry Maguire in that game against Arsenal. He really did a job on us. Looked really, really solid. 2.2 million is a really, really cheap price. I'm just not sure whether or not he's going to keep his place and play twice a week. He obviously came in with his FA Cup. I think he'd done a really, really good job. But I will have to see whether or not he does go on to play Southampton and if he looks like he's going to be someone that's going to play twice a week. But maybe one to keep an eye on. And if he does play Southampton, I think he's someone that you really are going to want to consider at that price. Right, Newcastle. So we mentioned it. They've got a run of 2 single game weeks in a row. So game week 20 and game week 21, just singles. But they double again in game week 22 with the Carabao Cup second leg. But how can we sell these players with such good form. So typically we always try to target the players who are going to have more fixtures, but it's 9 wins in a row for them. And they've got Isak and Gordon absolutely on fire. And not only that, they're keeping a ton of clean sheets as well. So Isak, 6 million, 20 points against Wolves with his 2 goals and an assist. He's now the 5th highest scoring player in the game. He's 23 points clear as the 3rd highest scoring striker on the game, despite having no Europe. So it's pretty understandable why a lot of people are on Isak, Salah, Haaland at the moment. 1 blank in his last 10 fixtures, scoring 12 and assisting 3 in those 10. So 15 attacking returns from his last 10 games is just outrageous. The informed player in the game at the minute, 17 goals, 7 assists for the season. So that was the question. Do you think any of Watkins, Solanke, Gakpo, Jota with potential 4 fixtures beat Isak with Bournemouth at home and Southampton away as his 2 singles? It's unlikely that Gakpo and Jota start all 4 of those fixtures, so it's kind of a false number a little bit. You might think Gakpo starts 3, Jota maybe 2 starts. I don't think I favour them over him. And then Watkins and Solanke, probably likelier to get 4 starts, maybe not with Duran hindering Watkins. But even still, I think I favour Isak. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Gordon, 5.2. So he's on a 9-game streak himself for attack and returns. 5 goals, 4 assists for the season. 5 goals, 4 assists in his 9-game streak. 8 goals, 6 assists for the season. So again, incredible form. I'd be more inclined to move him on and try and switch him for a doubling midfielder than, say, Isak, if I had them both. Especially if I've got a team with Isak, Palmer, Gordon. I do think you are going to want to try and get more doublers in that team. I do think Hall at 4.4 is going to be hard to move on as well if you've got him. 6 clean sheets in the last 10 games, 6th highest for bonus on the game, and 4 assists. But again, I think it's the category of Gordon. Like, it's not the end of the world if you have to keep him. But I do think you could probably move on to a defender that's going to outscore him with extra games. So I think Porro, Timber, Vardiol, I still think I would rather have those 3 than Hall at the moment. But Hall has been fantastic. Dubravka 2.7. Now, again, this is someone who I would have been better off just going Dubravka when it was my time to replace Raya. Would have been a lot easier on my budget. But the thing is with Dubravka is a lot of us have been thinking that Pope is going to come back soon. And also there was the talk that Dubravka could be moving on to Saudi. But it's not been happening. And I think if you're on Dubravka at 2.7 at the minute, you just keep him. Keep him until it forces your hand, I think. Until there's actually concrete news, you see Pope come back or you see that he's officially gone, I'd probably just keep Dubravka at this point. You can gain fixtures by moving to Raya, Martinez, Onana maybe, or Allison. But you're paying 2 million more. And I did it and I regret doing it. So I would just stick with Dubravka if you're on him at the moment. And then on to Chelsea. So the only question I think we have to have for Chelsea this week is Cole Palmer still essential with just single fixtures? So he's 6.1 million, the 4th highest scoring player on the game at the moment. Having not played Europe, not played the Carabao Cup, and not played the FA Cup. So I thought potentially there could be an odd chance that he played in the FA Cup. Deep down, I didn't think he would, but didn't want to try and take the chance on it, you know. So he was actually in the squad for Morecambe, but just unused sub on the bench. He wasn't needed, but obviously did play the Bournemouth game and come away with a goal, a well-taken goal, 14 points. So sort of shows what he can produce in just a single. Next up, they've got Wolves, who have just conceded 3 goals to Newcastle, 3 goals to Forest, and 2 goals to Spurs. Now that is a poor defence. Up against Cole Palmer. Chelsea haven't been at their best, but you do fancy Chelsea to do a job on Wolves. So I feel like it is a brave move to take on Palmer for that single. I think I'd consider doing it if it was your only route to Bruno Fernandes with a definite 2 fixtures, or Foden with a definite 2 fixtures. It's obviously not definite. They'll get them, but I feel like they will. I feel like they're 2 players who have a higher ceiling that could compare to Palmer. But in his last 10 games, so he's had 4 matches where he didn't get attacking returns. So you might look at that as, okay, yeah, I can take him on. Leicester, 4 points. Brentford, 7 points. Everton, 6 points. Ipswich, 4 points. They're the 4 games that he didn't return in. But he still got okay points. He didn't completely blank. But here's the problem. In those 6 games where he did return, he's hit 90 points combined. So average that across the 6 games. That's 15 points a match where he does get an attack in return. So the ceiling is so high with Palmer. I don't feel like it's worth the risk to take him out for Wolves. There is an edge to potentially be gained. I'd look at that City game in gameweek 21 away at City. I think that would be a point to sell him for me. I'd feel much more comfortable selling him for City away than Wolves at home. A quick look at captaincy. So a tricky week this week. And again, a week that I think we are going to have a bit of a split captaincy. So we've got Man City away at Ipswich and away to PSG. Liverpool away at Brentford, home to Lille. So those two stand out for Haaland and Salah. Man United home to Brighton, home to Rangers. So 2 nice home games. Could look towards Bruno Fernandes. But again, that sort of kind of depends. I think a lot will depend on that Southampton fixture. If he does really well against Southampton, I'd be inclined to go there again. But if he blanks against Southampton, I think that will be enough to probably put people off. You then got Villa away at Arsenal, away at Monaco. I think they are tough. You'd look at maybe Ollie Watkins. And then Spurs fixtures away at Everton, away at Hoffenheim are good. But I think it's just so tough to predict who's going to be the goal scorer for Spurs to be able to give one of them the armband. So I think the main 2 options this week will be Haaland and Salah. Haaland, 21 goals for the season, 1 assist. City's attack starting to click. Getting plenty of chances as well, even though he's not always putting them away. And then Salah, he's off the back of a rare blank against Forest, but do we actually think he's going to blank again? I don't think so. 21 goals, 17 assists for the season, so a bit more varied than Haaland, a lot more assists in there. Tougher Premier League fixture, you'd say Brentford versus Ipswich for Haaland, but he has got the better Champions League game, I think, of Lille at home. So a tough call between Haaland and Salah. A lot will come down to whether or not you think Ipswich or Brentford could be the one to go for, or if you just think that PSG fixture might be too off-putting to go Haaland. And then Bruno Fernandes, I think we just have to wait and see what happens this evening to find out whether or not we think he could be a captainable for a second match in a row. Here's how my team got on for game week 19. So it's been one of my worst game weeks in a little while. I've been on a bit of a high. I've been maintaining my position. In the top 50 for a little while now. Haven't had that much movement, but I definitely had movement this week. So I took out Trent Alexander-Arnold for Pedro Porro. Now, it might seem like a bonkers move, but the reason I did it was nothing against Trent. I needed the money to get Bruno Fernandes in. I needed a player, I thought, that would play 2 fixtures because I didn't think Palmer would. I didn't think Isak would. I didn't think Haaland would, and I didn't think Salah would. Salah was my vice. Haaland was my vice. Haaland would have been the guy that I probably would have captained if I didn't have Bruno. So far it's looking okay. We've got another game to go as well. So rank could improve. But it was the worst possible outcome. Trent smashing it, getting, 17 points or whatever it was against Accrington. But Porro did claw back 10. So it wasn't the end of the world. Diaz come out. He only got 1 pointer this week. So that looks like an okay move. And Bruno Fernandes getting me 8 points. So currently I'm on -3 from those moves, with Bruno still to play on the armband. So that's dropped me down from around 20th, I think it was. The last video I did was 30th, but I did get down as low as about 23rd, I think. But I've gone all the way up to 85 at the time of recording, but my captain still to play. So yeah, a bit of a disappointing game week. I think the Max Cappers have done me in this week. I think the Trent owners have obviously done me this week. And I think I've seen a lot of Phil Fodens out there as well, or Isak captainers. So fair play. But it's been a pretty bad game week for me. But I don't actually regret the decision. I was pretty sure that Trent wouldn't play Accrington, and then just the worst possible outcome has come of it. If I was going to blame myself for anything, it wasn't this move. It's taken a step back and looking a couple game weeks ago when I made the Muric replacement to Raya. Raya's been pretty poor. Arsenal defence has been pretty poor, or conceding at least, across that period. And if I'd have just gone for maybe a Dubravka, I'd have been a lot better off and I would have kept Trent. If I'd have gone for a Kinski last week downgrade and kept Trent, I would have been all right. So I think that goalkeeper decision cost me, and it's made me a bit struggling for budget. And I did mention at the time it could be an outcome that could go against me, but yeah, lesson learned. And if you haven't, or you're looking to move a keeper on later on, maybe that is something to consider. Will you need the budget later on? So not being the best game week, but still plenty of time to go. Looking at my team now, Brian Mbumo, 5 points. He's the guy that's got to go. I didn't want to take him out because I thought there was a chance he could play Plymouth. I wasn't confident of it, but I thought there was a chance. And of course, they were the only team to sort of suffer a massive upset. So just the 5 points from him. He has got to go this week for me. And then I've got a similar scenario, I think. I think I'm probably going to have a situation where I'm going to want to try and get another big hitter into my team. And to do that, I'm going to have to lose someone in my team to make way. I'm looking towards those 3 Arsenal defenders. If you throw Raya into the mix, and probably going to look to downgrade one of them to get a little bit more budget. But I haven't quite decided which one that's going to be yet. I hope you've enjoyed that episode. If you have, please do leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Do check out the Dream Team Tonic podcast that is currently out. Me, Tony, and Ben discussing Game Week 20 if you want a bit more info. And we'll have our deadline stream on Saturday morning, so do tune into that one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.